Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to our pack review of Daedalus Complex, our first pack in the Red Sand cycle. Joining me today is Timmy Wong again. Hi Timmy.
Hello again.
Alright, the last video took a very long time, so let's delve straight into this one. This video will feature the less powerful cards, but they're definitely still worth talking about. Additionally, each of the cards that I'm about to present will be accompanied by another card that already exists in the card pool that does basically a similar thing to the new card. The new card may be slightly stronger, slightly weaker, slightly different, but my objective is to show that if the pre-existing card doesn't see much play right now, there's little reason to think that the new card will see any play either, which is why I feel that they are less strong. So let's get started with pushing the envelope. This is a run event from the ANR faction. It's 3 to play. 3! That must give a very good effect, and it does. It gives you +2 strength for each install icebreaker till the end of the run. My big beef with this card is that it's basically a souped up version of Injection Attack. And while it does look like it's souped up, let's be honest. How often do you need +2 strength on all your breakers?
It's a pretty late game scenario that you really need this effect.
Yeah. That's all we can say about it. I have not many other comments.
There's also a heavy restriction, right? To make the card just a little bit worse to make sure you don't have to play this card.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, at the end of the day, if Injection Attack is barely seeing any play, and that's a neutral card that costs 0 influence, by the way, I don't see pushing the envelope seeing much play either.
It does fit in to this new Anarch theme of having very few cards in your grip. So, have you managed to make those cards do anything at all?
Whoa, wait. Are you saying there's a restriction on this card? You need to have...
Oh, yes.
Oh, what?
What?
Alright, so basically you need to have 3 cards or fewer in your hand before
No, two or fewer.
Before pushing the envelope.
Oh, I see.
So once you play it, there'll be 2 cards left in your hand. If you started with 3. So that is quite a restriction, yes. From the faction that likes to draw cards with Wild Side and I've had worse. Yeah, good call. That makes it all the more worse. Yeah. I don't know. Any redeeming factors, Timmy?
I'm just curious if you've managed to use Emptied Mind or Noble Path in any decks.
I think I might have a hidden mission one day where I try to get 28 clicks in one turn. That day will come. I could use Empty Mind then. Until then, they'll stay in the binder.
Oh, alright. Well, here's another card that you can keep them company with.
Yep. They will all have happy times in the binder. For now, we'll move on to Spot the Prey. This is a criminal event. And it is pretty criminal. It does the 2 criminal things, the 2 most criminal things. It exposes it exposes cards and it makes runs. So it's actually a pretty good effect when tied in together. Unfortunately, I think it's just a bit too far under the power curve. You can compare it to Deuce's Vault, but it's not exactly the same thing. In fact, their dynamics are quite different. Deuce's Vault allows you to expose ice, which means that you can scout out a server before deciding whether it's best to run it. With Spot the Prey, you can't do that, but what you can do is to scout out remotes, which is quite nice because this means that you can scout out traps, and if the trap turns out to be an agenda, you can run it instead. So that's quite cool. Do you think this is not... do you agree with me? Do you think this is not powerful enough?
I really only have one thing to say about this card, which is that it really should be a run event.
What? FFG, get your game together!
Yeah. Why can't I play this card with Ken and get a free credit? It's so maddening.
Oh man, that is so sad, yeah. Why? Why you do this? I mean, I guess because it's the first effect, I don't know.
Maybe they based it off of Deuce's Wild, but at least there, you almost, half the time you don't make a run with Deuce's Wild, so I guess it can either be a run event or not, and it's fine. But here you you almost always make the run.
Yeah, I guess it's to guard against the 0.1% chance that you cannot make a run. For example, if an Excalibur has been imposed, or you just played what's that new card? Something in your time, peace in our time. Yeah. Cards that stop you from making runs on that turn, then you can still play Spot the Prey, even though you can't reach the card for some reason if you want to. So I guess it makes sense that way. But yeah, it really should have the run subtype. Ah, man. FFG, get your act together. Okay. What about this one? Biomodeled Network. Shaper card. Prevent all but one damage. Why? Why, Timmy? Why? We cut down precious trees in our dear Earth for this card. Why? Uh,
Uh, I'm actually going to try to defend this card. I don't think it's that bad.
hit me with
It's if you so the obvious comparison is Deus Ex, which is a 3-cost program that prevents all net damage when trashed. So this card is only costs 1, which is a pretty big discount. It's not a program, which has both benefits and drawbacks. It doesn't take up MU, but it doesn't synergize with all the Shaper tricks of searching up Deus Ex and then recurring it. It's a resource, which means maybe you get tagged and it gets trashed, and you still take 1 net damage, which is pretty bad against certain Jinteki decks, namely Potential Unleashed and Kronos Protocol.
Yep.
But I don't know. It's like a very budget anti-net damage option for Shapers. They really didn't need this effect, but I could still see a couple decks slotting it for some good value.
Well, you didn't do a very good job of selling me the card, but that's not your fault. It's not your fault at all. Well, okay, so here's my here's my problem with the card. It's too niche. If you consider all the other net damage prevention options that Shaper have in faction, they all take up a fraction of the pie. Like, they have their own uses. Like, Deus Ex is very good at preventing big chunks of damage, like against Junebugs. Deus Ex protects against ice. So if you face plant into a DNA tracker or a Komainu, this is the Deus Ex is the best option you have against that. Where feedback filter takes up the niche of being permanent. So as long as you have money, the feedback filter will always be there to save you. So once you have all these portions of the pie taken up, you realize that Biomodel Network just doesn't fit anywhere. Its use is superseded by all the other cards that Shaper has access to. As you mentioned, basically the only good point about this is that it saves on memory and it saves on a bit of money. That's about it. And one net damage still goes through, so it really is not all that good. Because of how niche it is, I definitely don't see this seeing any play at all.
Yeah, so I think you can combo this card with Net Shield to prevent all net damage. So it's like a 2-card combo that lets you make Net Shield a little better by preventing large chunks of damage. It's like a very budget Shaper option, I guess.
Interesting. I'll probably have to send this question to Project Anchor. I'm not sure if this works with Net Shield. It should. That would be interesting to see. But yeah, that's a good point. They can combo with each other. Alright. So that's Shaper done, or so you thought. We have another card. This is Network Exchange. This is a resource. It's also virtual, so no hatchet jobs on this one. And it forces the corp to pay 1 more credit for each ice that's not installed as the innermost position. This is actually somewhat strong. This can see play, unlike the other cards that are in this video. The tax can add up, and against Glacier decks, this can do a lot of work. My problem with this is not so much direct comparison with Xanadu. They kind of do different things, but beyond that, my problem with Network Exchange is that it is in the faction that doesn't really need the effect. Shapers generally don't use credit denial as a means to their victory. So I'm not sure why you would want to play this in your Shaper deck.
Yeah, Shapers have even gotten this bet which rewards them for the corp having money. That seems to almost be their theme now. So it's not a very Shaper card. Much more criminal or ANR, this sort of bet.
Yeah, it's quite odd. And it's not one influence, it's two. So I find it very hard to justify splashing for this. Since each faction has a lot of good cards in their own rights already.
Yeah, and it's a very slow card, right? For it to pay off, you want to get it kind of early, but then it's not going to do anything for you until like many turns down the line.
Yep.
When the corp like double ices all their servers, then it starts paying off for you.
Yeah, and it's very possible that ice, some corps just are not going to play much ice at all. There are still corp strategies out there that just spam assets without ice. So yeah, it could be quite limited in use. Now the one upside, and this could be what tips the tables, is that Network Exchange, unlike all the other cards that tax the corp, is not unique. So you could theoretically stack 3 of this, and suddenly each extra ice costs 3 extra to install. Now that changes the maths for the corp. That makes ice very, very expensive.
I guess the reason it's Shaper is because Shapers are the faction that like is supposed to be good at dealing with stacked ice. So this is like another way for them to stop the corp from stacking ice effectively. Does that make sense?
No, no, it doesn't. If they're good at dealing with stacked ice, surely they don't need this, right?
Yeah, they don't need it, but it does play into their strength.
As in the corps aren't gonna stack ice already. I guess I'm thinking more of breakers like Houdini that keep their ice strength, keep their breaker strength. So as the corp, you're like, there's no point in me installing extra code gates on this server. So I'm already not gonna install that ice. Network Exchange isn't gonna change that. If that makes sense, yeah.
It could be a card for kits, right? Traditionally, against kit, you want to stack a bunch of ice, and you want to like put code gates on the outside of your good ice.
Ooh, now we are talking. Now we are talking. I like that. That's a very good idea. Yeah. Against kit, you almost always want to double ice your server. So yeah, that is very good synergy. I like that. All right, time to play kit.
Decent. I think most people have been talking about Network Exchange in one particular deck, though. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
What's that?
Most people have been talking about Network Exchange in one particular runner deck.
I haven't heard of it. Nope. What's that?
It's Diaper.
Oh dear. Let's pretend we never had this conversation. Let's erase this from everyone's minds. We do not need more cards for Diaper at this point. But you are right. It does help Diaper. Sadly.
To be fair, I don't know if this card is powerful enough to really make a dent in either Diaper or Kit, but like, yeah. It's unfortunate that this card makes stacking ice on R&D like basically impossible against Diaper.
Yeah, on the bright side, against Diaper, you are probably relatively rich as the corp because they're not contesting your assets and you're not raising your ice. So I think this won't make much of a difference. We'll see though.
Well, you have to stack like 7 ice or so, and that's 2 plus 2 added to 7 all the way to 7. That's like 2, 3, 4, 27 credits, I think, with one of these out.
Yeah, that makes
sense. I guess it's doable.
Yeah, I guess most corps just try to end the game before then. But yeah, I could see this being better against the corps that don't have viable scoring routes. Yeah. Right.
Well, that's nice.
Now I'm depressed again. Thanks, Timmy.
Right. Oh, Netrunner.
Oh, Netrunner. Let's clear the depression with some nice agendas. How about this one? Next wave 2. It's a next agenda. Very fresh subtype on this agenda. If there's a rest piece of next dice when you score it, you may deal 1 brain damage. I was very excited for this card at first. Unfortunately, this does not boost next ice, so this doesn't count as a next ice, obviously, because it's an agenda. Even though it has next subtype. So yeah, having it in your score area doesn't give your silvers 1 more subroutine, unfortunately. What it does, however, is deal 1 brain damage. How good's that? Not very good? Yeah, I think it's analogous to self-destruct chips, which not many people are playing. If they are not playing self-destruct chips, I don't think there's much reason to play next wave 2.
I'm not sure if that's entirely fair. Brain damage is good when you get a critical mass of it. So the fact that there are kind of 2 self-destruct chip effects, 2 agendas that do brain damage, that could be a big deal.
That is true. On the other hand, if you have scored enough of these agendas to deal a critical amount of brain damage, you might as well go for the win instead. Like, you have enough agendas to win.
You only want to play this card in a very dedicated brain damage deck, because otherwise when brain damage isn't that high impact.
Yes.
And it also needs to be a deck where you have a lot of next dice, or this card will just not do anything.
Yeah.
So you're very pigeonholed into a particular strategy here.
Yep, I think that's a very good analysis of the card. This is a very niche deck. If you are playing a standard next dice deck that scores agendas to win, this is not really what you're going for. But if you're going for a flatline deck, this could be good, because the difference with self-destruct chips is that it actually does brain damage, so it triggers that current defective brain chips, right? So that becomes 2 brain, which is quite significant. So yeah, definitely can see that being good. And in fact, I can see that's probably the only way you can play it. Otherwise, 1 brain is just not enough. You're better off. There are lots of better agendas. You can play the never advanceable agendas instead, your ABT, your Vitruvius, or a corporate sales team. Why would you not take 10 credits?
Yeah. So in the one particular deck where you can play this card, this will be, like your 3rd best agenda or something, or worse.
Yeah, sadly. It's just not that good. But, yep, you are right in that it has niche users, so not something to count out. Count out. It's better than Sentinel Defense, whatever that thing is. That can stay in the creation and control binder.
You can combo them together.
Get out. Get out. Okay. Alright, the next card we have is a HB upgrade. This is Defense Construct, and it breaches new ground, right, Timmy? The first upgrade that can be advanced. How about that?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. It's been kind of a tenet since the start of the game that if you see an advanced card in a server, then it's almost certainly an agenda. And if it's not an agenda, then it's an asset that probably does something nasty to the runner. The runner runs it.
So, I mean, even ignoring all the text on the card itself, do you think the presence of an advanceable upgrade will change the game in any way?
I do. I think it opens up some interesting decision spaces. I think the most prominent one for me is it makes certain traps a lot easier to land. Because normally if you advance a card in a server, you can't put another asset in there. So you can't put an asset trap in the same server.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just trying to think of what card combos I can use. I mean, assuming we have a blank defense construct, a blank upgrade that can be advanced. Where could I possibly use a blank upgrade that can be advanced?
I think you put it in your scoring server together with an Edge of World.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah. Okay, I see where this is getting. Yeah. I guess the biggest problem is that, I mean, you want this to look like an agenda, right? So the problem is there are not that many unadvanceable traps that are that good. Edge of World is one of them.
Right.
That's the edge case. I like that. That's very good thinking. All
I
right.
think that's mainly the use case right now.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that would be really good? Like snare is fine,
Okay. Yeah,
but
it's okay.
like if people are suspecting Junebug, they'll play around it and not die.
Yeah. Psychic Field could be interesting as well, but that doesn't kill,
Yes.
so it's okay at best. Yeah, this could be viable in, say, a biotech deck. So you load up on the net damage and then finish them off on your turn with biotech. Interesting. Good
I
to
think you could also use it to draw people into your Psychic Field Prisec combo, right?
Yes, yes, you could. Yeah, I mean, what a degenerate combo, but yes, you certainly could.
Normally, it's hard to get people to run these traps because they don't look like that dangerous if they're not advanced. Runners will be like, that could easily be a Psychic Field or something. I don't want to run it. At worst, the corp gets 2 points.
Yeah. So with this card, if you're willing to pay the influence for it, suddenly, if the corp advances something in a remote, you can't just assume it's an asset on an agenda anymore. Although you still will for the most part because it's only this one card that doesn't do much else. So yeah, this could be very potent if played at the right time.
It could be a nasty surprise for sure.
Very, very nasty, yeah.
Yeah, I think FFG has understandably been cautious with this design space because it just like messes with the basic understanding of the game, how servers work.
Yeah, I think one of the things you always teach newbies is that if you see something advanced, it's either an asset or an agenda, and with that no longer no longer holding, that really changes things because usually it's easy to make a reasonable assumption of what might be in the server, based on what's advanced and when the corp put it there. But this just turns things on its head.
Yeah, which is cool. I think it's a good time to introduce this sort of wacky effect, and I think this card is definitely not pushed too much to upset the whole game.
Yeah.
Do you agree with me there?
I definitely do. Speaking of that, we'll move into that. I like that you brought that point up. Usually when they introduce these kinds of new mechanics, they tend to be very conservative with it, and the power level tends to be incredibly low. This one's no exception. It is, as you can see on the screen, basically a duplicate of Allure Repression, except a lot worse. The Allure Repression works anytime. It has a trash can, and doesn't require the runner to be in a run to use it. Whereas this requires the runner not only to be running, but to be running on archives. So immediately, if you're using this card for its text box, you need to have it on archives, which kind of defeats the purpose, right? Of baiting runners into a remote.
Yeah, the only time you would ever use the ability itself is to rescue agendas from archives, right?
Yep.
But you have to set this card up either in advance or after you already have agendas in there. It's just very impractical for that purpose.
Mm-hmm. And I thought this was still okay when I first read it. I mean, it has almost the same stats as Allure Repression. No trash cost sucks, but it's an upgrade. But then I realized you can only use this on face down cards. So, you can't recur the biotics or the hedge funds that you used earlier. You can't, save your keyhole agendas, for example, which makes it a lot worse.
Yeah, definitely. I expect that even if this card is played, the text on it will, after the first line, will effectively be blank. 90% of the time.
Yes, that is for sure. I mean, given that Allure Repression sees virtually no play, trust me, I tried to make it work. It was just way too expensive. For those of you who haven't tried it out yet, Allure Repression just takes too much money. Even though recursion is strong, it's too expensive for their effect. Defense Construct does not help whatsoever.
I did like Allele for a bit in Industrial Genomics to I don't know, as like weird archives protection. But it was a very niche card even then for sure. You
Yeah,
have to be in like a very stable position to start chaining alleles into itself and recurring your good cards, and it takes forever.
yeah, interesting. My first thought with Aliu was to use it on Mushins since they're in faction and have endless Mushins. You could
Ooh.
kind of do that with defense construct in HB, but again, it's just way too conditional for the effect to be useful.
I wonder if the reason it says face down is so that because with the Leo repression, it can return itself, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. That's kind of a weird like rules edge case that isn't really obvious. So maybe they did it to stop defense construct from doing that too.
that's quite true. Uh, in the process, making it virtually unplayable for that effect,
Right.
unfortunately. Also, what's with the smiley face on the art? I've been wondering that since it was spoiled. I mean, it's nice. Is there a reference somewhere? Maybe? Who knows?
Yeah, it's got to be a reference to something, right?
Well,
Android is pretty good at
they
references.
really are. Viewers, if you have any idea, leave in the comment section. But for now, we'll move on to the next. This is not more. I did not change the title. This is Sin DNA Modification. What on earth is this card? It's a ugly, very ugly Komainu. Jeez, man, that thing has morphed into something really ugly.
So I
Basically,
guess the theme here is that you've injected synthetic DNA into the Komaginu and it's like mutated into something horrible.
uh, yeah, I don't want to deal with that, Komainu. Unfortunately, it's just not that good, is it? It doesn't really help with the active flatline very much. It's a more passive bioethics, I would dare say. It has the once per turn restriction, so you're not gonna get more mileage out of this than you are a bioethics. So at that point, it just becomes a bioethics that can be protected by ice, and only
Right.
triggers conditionally. I don't know if this is much good.
I don't think it is. I took a good long look at this card because it's so similar to other like very frustratingly powerful Shinteki net damage cards. But I think it's just a little bit too conditional slash overcosted.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, you'll just be better off playing bioethics instead. Um, yeah, there's really not much else to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, you can play it in a non-naked remote deck, but then you need a lot of things to go right to actually trigger it a lot. It's very vulnerable because the trash cost is low. The res cost is like decently significant too. So yeah, the numbers are just not good enough to play this card, I think.
Yeah, and it's not something you can splash even at one influence because it's restricted to APIs, which the other factions don't have in large quantities. Oh well.
You can put it behind like a Kakugo for
Yep.
like 2 guaranteed damage, I guess.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Yeah, that's about it, I guess. It
Yeah.
I can see it being quite annoying if you record it with, say, something like friends in high places or interns. So forcing the runner to keep attacking this synth DNA modification, that could be quite annoying. And of course, the two separate instances of net damage trigger potential unleashed twice. So yeah, you could have a thing going there, but for the most part, it's a bit too easy to trash, too expensive to res, and just doesn't do enough.
If the better, if basically like Bioethics Association gets nerfed somehow, maybe there will be a more healthy, grindy deck that uses this card, like recurring it back, and then like turtling up behind a lot of net damage ice. That could be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's true. Once you remove bioethics from the equation, this might, people might go to this instead. One cute thing is that it, just like the Shaper resource we talked about earlier, this is not unique, and you can res it when the runner encounters a AP ice. So the runner could be taking some net damage unexpectedly. It's quite nice to force the runner into a situation where they either break the ice and take net damage, or don't break the ice and take net damage anyway because it's AP. So that's quite interesting.
How Jinteki.
Yes, very Jinteki. 1,000 cuts, getting stronger. Now, here's Quarantine System. This synergizes with Jamison Astronautics, which we talked about in the last video, in that you can forfeit an agenda to trigger Jamison. Unlike Oberth Protocol, however, the effect is not that good. You get to res up to 3 pieces of ice because Criminal just de-res them all with Exploit, and you can lower the res cost by 2 credits for each printer agenda point that you just forfeited. I mean, it could be a lot of credits. This basically says you gain 6 credits per agenda point that you sacrificed, which is okay.
Yeah, the numbers are decently big, enough to make forfeiting agenda possibly worthwhile.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan of the fact that you are just going. Yeah, you're not making progress with your win condition at all if you're using this card.
Yeah, like
this,
resing ice is nice and all, but it doesn't help you win the game, and you just lost an agenda to do it.
Yeah, like for this to work, you must have res some ice that really keeps the runner out. And the reason I put Watchdog there is pretty similar. If you are focused on a sort of strategy that reses ice cheaply, like with Watchdog or something like Shoot the Moon, you realize that these strategies just aren't that good because runners can get through ice rather easily nowadays, no matter what ice you choose.
Yeah. The fact that you like pre-res a bunch of this ice is normally kind of bad because a lot of the value of ice these days is in the surprise value and face check penalty.
Yep.
And resing your ice beforehand is pretty bad for that.
Yeah.
But there are some times when you really wanted to be able to res your ice and you can't.
Yeah, we are thinking of blackmail here, aren't we? With against Valencia and the like.
And DDoS also.
Yeah, DDoS more relevant. Yeah, but for Valencia, you have other solutions that are infection like Elizabeth Mills, and those are much more playable. So yeah, when you narrow down the reasons why you want to play quarantine system, there just aren't that many of them.
Yeah, I think this card is actually mostly a tech card against both Valencia and DDoS combo.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
You compare it to cards like Elizabeth Mills and Executive Bootcamp, and I think there are like pluses and minuses to each of these options. Like this card like does combo with the new ID Jemison. So in Jemison, you could like slot this card as your hate card against those decks, and it's not a dead card in other matchups. You can like get some value out of it, putting free advancement counters and also cheating out some ice for pretty cheap. Like that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I can see that. It's not always dead. Like I mean, as long as you build your deck with ice, you always have the option of using this to res your ice, which is quite cool. But ultimately, as you said, there are too many scenarios where this is just not that good for you simply because you want the face check value. But you can still get face check value. This is a paid ability. It's that you don't need a click. So yeah, that's something quite important to take note of. Yeah, if you have this installed, you can use this to res your ice as the runner's approaching it. So that's quite interesting.
You can use it to surprise res an ice that the runner didn't think he could afford. Kind of like Mamba Temple and Advanced Assembly Lines let you do sometimes. Yep. But this one lets you res like really expensive ice for a big discount.
Yeah, now we are finding more of those niche situations where it'll be good. Yeah, surprise reses is one of them. One of my favorite tricks is playing what do you call it? Brain taping warehouse deck. The runner's like, oh, you can't res an Ichi. You're only on 3 credits. I'll run first click. Whoops. That's an Ichi. Yeah, so same thing with this. You can be poor. You can pretend you're unable to defend your servers, but wait, yes you can. This helps you do that. Yeah. Another interesting thing is it also triggers ice that work on res. So I'm thinking of Magnet here.
Ooh.
Yeah, so
that is cool.
Yeah, on the Magnet on a stick is always something to look at if you're playing this card.
Maybe this helps like Blue Sun, because right now one of their problems is like Parasipper on their big ice.
Yep.
So now you have to play both Magnet and this card so that you can res your Magnet in response to their Parasite.
Yeah, forfeit an agenda to get rid of a parasite seems like a good trade. Well, we'll keep that option
you do what you gotta do.
Yeah, you gotta do. Yeah, I mean, it is an expensive ice you're losing after all. Well, it's still an option. Yeah, I think it's quite interesting that we found some niche cases where quarantine system could be good. So these are probably the kind of things that you want to be thinking about if you're thinking of including this card in your deck. For now, let's move on to Condi Plaza. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. This is an upgrade. It's ritzy as all hell, and it gives you recurring credits to rest ice protecting the server. Now, you would think that the analogous card I've chose for this one would be Dedicated Technician Team, which is a very weak version of this, but I choose Diversified Portfolio instead because I postulate that if you're playing this card, you are probably not going to get more than one res out of this upgrade. Maybe 2 reses at most. It is very atypical that you have lots of ice stacked on a server that you want all of the ice res for. Which is why I don't think this card will be much good. You need to be playing asset spam, and you need to have a lot of ice on the server to make this worthwhile. And those two things just contradict each other so hard because if you're playing asset spam, you're not going to run much ice.
Yeah, just this card just doesn't really work that effectively if you think about how it works, because you have to have a bunch of servers, and then you need to have this in your protected server, and then the runner needs to run it so that you can actually use your credits to res the ice. So then you pay 3 to res this card, and then get some number of recurring credits to res your ice, and then either they get it and trash it, or they don't. And then, like, how many times are they going to run your server and let you res ice, right?
Yeah, exactly. And even if you stack like 3 or 4 ice on the server if you manage to, these are recurring credits. So if you cannot keep the runner out for that turn, they'll just go all the way through, and you'll be forced to pay real credits for the subsequent ice.
Yeah, the numbers on this card are very bad for the very limited effect you get.
Yeah. Basically I don't see you getting more than X credits of value out of this card, at which point you might as well play Diversified Portfolio instead, which is a lot less conditional. I think Condi Plaza would be strong if this wasn't restricted to the server that it is in. If this... if it were an asset... Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
It would.
Like
it would be
Temple.
Mamba Temple on steroids. Yeah. Well, thank goodness we are not getting that card. We don't need any more cards that enable asset spam.
You can use it to surprise res ice also. Like maybe you don't need to play as many. Like this counts as an econ card, so you just like surprise. I have enough money to res my toll booth or whatever.
Are you saying that we should play that with quarantine system?
Ooh.
Surprise res ice for no credits at all?
Getting a lot of effects that lets do that.
Maybe. Alright. For now, let's move on to the final card in the pack. This is Signal Jamming. Another upgrade, another neutral card, another 2 to trash. This one has a trash can on it. It doesn't trigger Geist because it's a co-op card, but what it does is that it prevents the runner from installing any cards until the end of the run. The problem is it also prevents you from installing any cards until the end of the run. As niche as that is, it might happen, say, from an Architect. But ignoring that for now, do you think this could be good? What sort of effects would you want to stop the runner from triggering? What sort of cards do you want to stop them from installing?
So this is a counter to basically Shaper bullshit, right?
Yep.
Shapers are famous for having all these effects that let them install just the right program in the middle of a run. So this is the card that's like, well, I guess you can't do that for this run. It's also more relevant with all the conspiracy breakers now, because basically anarchs are now also experiencing the joy of never having to like
yeah, because anarchs are the good faction, yeah.
Yeah. With the install from heap breakers, if you have the right breakers in your heap, you can just break whatever ice you encounter. And that's pretty crazy for never having to deal with a nasty Century subroutine.
Yep.
So this card does counter those things for one run. The problem is that it's temporary and the trash cost is low. It's hard to justify the card slot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here you've compared it to Navi Mumbai City Grid, which is that effect strictly better? No.
No,
Because
because
of the
you
consumer
did identify the one
Yeah.
subgroup of cards that's actually quite relevant right now, which is the Conspiracy Breakers.
Mhm.
Navi Grid does not stop the Conspiracy Breakers from install because they are not paid abilities. But for most other installs, they come from paid abilities. Your SMC, your Clone Chip, your Artist Colony, yeah, all your Shaper bullshit. Navi Grid just does that better. And further to that, Navi Grid has its own niches as well that Signal Jamming cannot do. Navi Grid stops Data Sucker. Navi Grid stops Aaron Maron. Stops David. So all in all, I just think that Navi Grid is just stronger for the most part versus Signal Jamming. But if we are not seeing people play Navi Grid for its intended effect, why would people play Signal Jamming? That's my logic. And because of that, I don't think Signal Jamming will be very strong. The only case I see, I think Signal Jamming will be played is if Conspiracy Breakers are super strong and you want to have some way to deal with it. Or to counter them. Which is quite niche, in my opinion.
It's definitely a niche card, for sure. I have seen Navi Grid used to some good effect recently out of New Angeli's Soul. The idea is you can use the Data Rave and Data Ward combo, which is wrecked by Aaron Marone, but then you put Navi Grid behind it so that they can't remove the tag in between your eyes.
Yeah, that's very innovative. I love that.
Yeah.
Very good use of card pool knowledge right there.
So that case, I guess, edges Navi Grid into playability because of all the other things it can also do to mess with the runner.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I agree with you that Navi Grid is generally the superior card because it's permanent, it has these other effects. But Signal Jamming has some upsides. It's neutral, so you don't have to pay influence for it outside of MBN, which is huge because...
Yeah, that's a very big factor. No, everyone doesn't really have influence right now.
Yeah. MBN is not traditionally a Glacier faction, so they can't use Navi Grid quite as well as some other factions could, probably. And Signal Jamming isn't a region, so if you want to play with nice regions, like Sansan or something, maybe you can't play Navi Grid because of that.
Well, yeah, that's a very good point, yeah. And also it's 0 to res, so...
That's
yeah,
huge.
very cheap, yeah. So yeah, Signal Jamming has its upsides, but yeah, it's always worth it to do the comparison with Navi Grid to decide which one's more suitable for your deck. And that brings our video to a close. That's all the cards from this pack. What do you think of the pack as a whole, Timmy?
When it was first spoiled, a lot of people were like, this pack is really underpowered. And looking at it now, I think that was probably an overstatement. We were just given Quorum, which had some like crazy powerful cards in it. So we were probably a little bit spoiled there in terms of power level.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree. Yeah, we really have been spoiled. We are now trained to expect big meta shifting, game changing cards in every pack. This one's not the case. It really feels like a very Lucas Litzinger pack where most of the cards are binder fodder and you get a couple of good ones. There are no cards that really stand out in this pack to me, unfortunately. But there are some good cards, and I'm very excited to experiment with those few cards, which is quite good.
Yeah, I think it's good that the power level is being dialed back a bit from what we can see.
I'm very happy with that too, yeah.
Power creep will certainly kill the game very effectively, very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, this pack has a good deal of pretty cards that I think have a good chance of impacting the meta. I think Exploit was a really good catch. Mad Dash is a powerful effect. And Zed and Sync SDRE are pretty impactful ice. And Jemison is a cool new ID. So yeah, it's a cool pack that's gonna shake things up a little bit, but not too much.
Yeah, I absolutely concur with your thoughts there. I'm most interested in those cards that encourage very aggressive running and dynamic interaction. Exploit is a very good example of that. You run a lot and you interact with the co-op and force them to play around your DRS ice now. So that's very interesting. I really like the design on some of these cards, and all in all, yeah, this is a nice pack to add to the card pool. Yeah. Hopefully, if the rest of the cycle pans out to be like that, it might be a sign of good things to come. Especially if we get new archetypes that hopefully enable more co-op strategies to be viable. That would be great.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully more cards that encourage more traditional netrunner play of like balanced threats behind some amount of ice, rather than all these different horizontal strategies that are kind of tearing the game in too many different directions.
See, yeah. All right. So we'll leave it at that. Thanks again, Timmy, for your time.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Right, and until next time, everyone. Thanks for watching and happy net running. Goodbye.
Take care.